Sir, the men's registration is over.
Wait, isn't that a guy? Look at those shoulders.
Excuse me, sir. The ladies' orientation is on the other side.
I'm a girl.
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry.
Seriously, I thought she was a guy. She really looks like a man. That's so mean. But they're not wrong.
The laughter started with just one voice, then another. Within seconds, the entire university auditorium was buzzing. Sir, the men's registration is over. A young man near the entrance pointed towards the stage and burst into laughter. More students turned, some laughed openly, others whispered behind their hands. Several reached for their phones. Juliet stopped walking. Her fingers tightened around the file she was holding. For a moment, she couldn't move. The security officer hurried over. "I'm sorry," he said politely. "The ladies' orientation is on the other side." Juliet forced a smile. "I'm a girl." Silence. The officer blinked. His face turned bright red. I'm so sorry," but the apology came too late. The whispers had already spread across the auditorium. "Seriously, I thought she was a guy. Look at her shoulders." "No way." Juliet lowered her head. She wanted the ground to swallow her whole. Every step toward her seat felt heavier than the last. She pretended not to hear. She pretended not to care. Pretended she wasn't falling apart inside. Beside her, a girl quietly nudged her friend. "I feel bad for her." Another shook her head. "I don't. She really does look like a man." Juliet stared at the floor. She had heard those words before, in secondary school, in church, at family gatherings, even from complete strangers. But somehow, hearing them on the first day of the university hurt the most, because this was supposed to be a fresh beginning. Welcome to African Tales by Onana. Today's story is about a young woman who was judged not because of her character, but because of the body she was born in. While other girls were admired for their beauty, she was mocked for looking too masculine. Every mirror became a reminder of everything she believed she lacked. Every laugh felt like another wound. She dreamt of being loved, accepted, and seen for who she truly was. But the world seemed determined to judge only what it could see. But sometimes the greatest prison isn't the opinion of others. It's believing those opinions are true. What would you do if everyone laughed at the way you looked? Would you spend your life trying to become someone else, or would you find the courage to embrace the person you were created to be? This is the story of Juliet, a girl who spent years wishing she had someone else's body until one unexpected moment changed the way she saw herself forever. The day the admission list was released, Juliet and Rose screamed so loudly that the entire neighborhood came outside. "We got in!" Rose jumped onto Juliet, laughing uncontrollably. "We are going to university together." Juliet laughed just as hard. For a few minutes, nothing else mattered. Not money, not the future, not fear. Just two best friends celebrating the biggest achievement of their lives. Growing up, they had shared almost everything. The same classroom, the same dreams, the same secrets. But there was one thing they could never share: the way people saw them. Whenever Rose entered a room, heads turned. She had smooth brown skin, a graceful walk, smooth facial features, and a naturally curvy figure that made every outfit look effortless. People complimented her everywhere. "You are so beautiful. You should be a model. You will break plenty of hearts in university." Rose usually laughed the compliments away. Juliet smiled too. But deep inside, every compliment Rose received reminded Juliet of everything she had believed she wasn't. Juliet was tall, much taller than most girls her age. Her shoulders were broad. Her arms were naturally muscular for years of helping her father with every work at home. She barely had curves. Every single t-shirt made her look like an athlete, or worse, a young man. She couldn't count how many times strangers had greeted her with, "Good afternoon, sir." Before quickly apologizing, she would laugh it off. "It's okay." But every apology left another invisible crack in her confidence. One afternoon, as they prepared for university, Rose stood in front of a mirror trying on a new dress. It fits perfectly, Rose said excitedly. Juliet smiled. It really does. Rose noticed Juliet staring at herself in the mirror. What? Juliet hesitated. Do you ever wish you looked different? Rose frowned. No. Juliet forced another smile. I wish I looked more like you. Rose immediately walked over and held both of Juliet's hands. Don't ever say that. But it's true. I don't have your confidence. I don't have your strength. I don't have your intelligence. And I definitely don't have your heart. Juliet looked away. She wanted to believe her best friend. She really did. But believing kind words was much harder than believing the cruel ones. As the first day of university drew closer, Juliet packed more than clothes into her suitcase. She packed years of insecurity, years of comparison, years of pretending that harsh words didn't hurt. She had no idea university was about to test every one of them. University life moved faster than Juliet had imagined. Within weeks, everyone seemed to have found their place. One afternoon, she and Rose were walking across campus when a group of students passed by. One of the boys smiled at Rose. You are beautiful. Rose thanked him politely. Then another student looked at Juliet. You must be a brother. The group burst into laughter. Rose immediately turned back. That's not funny. But they had already walked away. Juliet forced a smile. It's okay. Rose stopped walking. No, it isn't. Juliet looked away. I'm used to it. Those four words broke Rose's heart. That evening, Juliet made a decision. If she couldn't change people's opinions, maybe she could change herself. She watched beauty videos for hours. She learned new makeup techniques. She bought dresses she had never had the confidence to wear. She changed her hairstyle. She practiced smiling in the mirror. She even changed the way she walked. For a few days, she believed it was working until a cashier at a supermarket handed her change and said, Thank you, sir. Juliet stood there in silence, then quickly walked away. Back in her hostel room, she sat on the edge of her bed. She looked at every new dress she had bought, every cosmetic product, every hairstyle she had tried. None of them had changed the one thing she wanted to change most: how people saw her. That night, she cried herself to sleep. There was one place on campus where Juliet forgot about her insecurities: the university library. It was quiet, peaceful. No one cared what anyone looked like. Everyone was too busy studying. That was where she first noticed Daniel. He was intelligent, respectful, soft-spoken. Unlike many students, he greeted everyone with the same kindness. Over the next few weeks, they crossed paths often. Sometimes he held the library door open for her. Sometimes they borrowed books from the same shelf. Sometimes they exchanged small smiles. For the first time in years, Juliet felt something she hadn't expected: hope. Rose noticed it immediately. You like him, don't you? Juliet laughed nervously. What? No. Rose smiled. You blush every time he says good morning. Juliet covered her face. Is it that obvious? Rose nodded. You should talk to him. Juliet wanted to. She really did. But fear was louder than courage. A few days later, she overheard a conversation outside one of the lecture halls. Two boys were laughing. I can't date a girl who's built like a wrestler. The other laughed. What if she's rich? I'll still say no. I don't want my girlfriend looking stronger than me. They both laughed. Juliet froze. She wasn't the person they were talking about, but it didn't matter. Their words hit her like they were. That evening, Daniel walked toward her across campus. Hi, Juliet. She looked at him, then remembered the laughter, the joke, the whispers. Before he could say another word, she quickly turned around and walked away. Daniel stood there, confused. Juliet kept walking, not because she didn't like him, but because she had already convinced herself no man ever could. A week later, Juliet's communication skills lecturer walked into the class with exciting news. I have an announcement. The classroom became quiet. Our university will be hosting the annual public speaking championship. The winner will represent the school at the National Student Speech Competition. The room erupted with excitement. Students immediately began discussing the prize money and the prestige that came with winning. Juliet kept her eyes on her notebook. The announcement stirred something she had buried for years, a memory. Back in secondary school, Juliet wasn't the quiet girl sitting at the back of the class. She was the girl everyone expected to see on stage. She won debate competitions, she anchored school events. Teachers often said, if Juliet is speaking, people will listen. She loved standing before a crowd, not because she wanted attention, but because she loved inspiring people. Some even nicknamed her the Golden Voice. Then the comments about her appearance became louder. Each joke stole a little of her confidence. Each laugh made the stage feel farther away. Eventually, she stopped raising her hand, stopped joining competitions, stopped believing her voice mattered. As students left the classroom, Rose caught up with Juliet. You heard him, Juliet nodded. You should register. Juliet laughed softly. Rose, that version of me doesn't exist anymore. He does. No. Rose stepped in front of her. Juliet, your appearance has changed. Nothing about your talent. Juliet forced a smile. My talent isn't the first thing people notice. She walked away before Rose could answer. That night, Juliet opened an old box she had brought from home. Inside were dusty certificates, best debater, best public speaker. Overall, a standing speaker, she ran her fingers across the papers. A tear rolled down her cheek. She couldn't remember the last time she believed she deserved any of them. The deadline for the competition was only 2 days away. Everywhere on campus, colorful posters covered the notice boards. Can you inspire a nation? Register today. Students practiced speech under trees, others rehearsed in empty classrooms. The excitement spread across the university. Everyone seemed eager except Juliet. Whenever she walked past the posters, she looked away. She had already made up her mind she wasn't going. That evening, Rose found her reading in the hostel. You still haven't registered. Juliet didn't look up. I am not going to. Why? You already know why. No, Juliet replied calmly. I know the excuse you are hiding behind. Juliet sighed. If I stand on stage, people won't hear my speech. They will look at me. They will whisper. They will laugh. Rose pulled a chair closer. Maybe some will. Juliet looked at her. But what if someone in that audience needs to hear your story? Juliet remained silent. Rose smiled. You've spent years letting strangers decide what you can and cannot do. Don't let them steal this too. Juliet shook her head. I can't. Rose didn't argue anymore. Instead, she quickly picked up Juliet's student identification card from the table. The next morning, while Juliet was in the library, Rose walked straight to the registration desk. I would like to register someone. The volunteer smiled. Name? Juliet Adebayo. Faculty. Rose answered every question. The volunteer stamped the form. Done. Tell her we'll see her at the preliminary round on Monday. Rose smiled to herself. She doesn't know it yet, but she will. Later that afternoon, Juliet received a notification on her phone. Congratulations, your registration for the annual public speaking competition has been confirmed. She stopped walking, her eyes widened. She immediately called Rose. Rose, there was a long pause. Did you register me? Rose laughed nervously. Maybe. Rose, you'll thank me later. Juliet covered her face with one hand. For the first time in weeks, her biggest fear had an official date. Monday arrived much sooner than Juliet had hoped. The university auditorium was overflowing with students. Contestants walked in one after another, dressed in elegant suits and beautiful gowns. Some rehearsed confidently, others laughed with their friends. Juliet stood quietly near the entrance, clutching the speech she had rewritten at least 20 times. Her palms were soaked with sweat. "I can't do this," she whispered. Rose squeezed her hand. "You've already done the hardest part." Juliet looked at her. "No, the hardest part is walking in." Together, they entered the hall. Almost immediately, Juliet felt the familiar stares. A group of students looked in her direction. "Is she one of the contestants? I thought this was an individual competition." "It is." "Then where is her partner?" Another student chuckled. "I think that's a guy." The laughter wasn't loud, but Juliet heard every word. She lowered her head and kept walking. As contestants were called one by one, the audience applauded each performance. Some speakers were funny, others were emotional. A few received standing ovations. Juliet's heartbeat grew faster with every passing minute. Then the announcer's voice echoed through the hall. "Contestant number 12, Juliet Adebayo." For a second, she couldn't move. The applause faded into silence. Every eye in the auditorium seemed fixed on her. She stood, then slowly walked towards the stage. Halfway there, someone in the audience whispered loudly, "Let's see what he has to say." A few people laughed. Juliet stopped. Her hands began to tremble. She looked at the exit. She could still leave. No one was forcing her to stay. Juliet closed her eyes. She took one deep breath, then another. She walked onto the stage, adjusted the microphone, looked at hundreds of unfamiliar faces. For a brief moment, the entire auditorium became silent. Juliet stared at the audience. Her prepared speech lay on the podium before her. She looked down at it, then gently folded the pages. She pushed them aside. The judges exchanged curious glances. Juliet looked up again. "My speech today," she paused, "isn't the one I came here to read." The hall became even quieter. I had prepared a speech about leadership, but standing here today, I've realized there's something more important. She took a slow breath. Have you ever been judged before someone ever knew your name? A few students shifted in their seats. Have you ever smiled in public, then cried in private? The laughter that had filled the auditorium earlier had completely disappeared. For years, I believed there was something wrong with me. I believed I wasn't feminine enough. I believed I wasn't beautiful enough. I believed I wasn't worthy of love. Simply because my body didn't look the way people expected. Juliet's voice began to shake. But then I asked myself a question. If I spend my whole life trying to become someone else, who will become the person I was created to be? I have broad shoulders. I have an athletic build. I've been called sir more times than I can count. Some of you laughed at me today. Juliet wasn't angry. She wasn't accusing anyone. She simply spoke the truth. And for a long time, I let those laughs define me, but not anymore. My worth isn't measured by my body. It isn't measured by strangers. It isn't measured by beauty standards. My worth comes from my character, my kindness, my courage, and the voice God gave me. Tears rolled down Juliet's cheeks, but she didn't stop speaking. If there's someone sitting here today who hates the person they see in the mirror, I hope you remember this. You don't have to look like someone else to become someone extraordinary. For several seconds, no one moved, no one spoke. The auditorium was silent. Then one judge slowly stood up. He began to clap. Another judge stood, then another. Within moments, the entire auditorium rose to its feet. The applause echoed through the hall. Some students who had laughed earlier wiped tears from their eyes. Others couldn't even look Juliet in the face. Rose stood in the crowd, crying openly. She wasn't crying because Juliet had given the perfect speech. She was crying because, after years of hiding, her best friend had finally found a voice again. The applause continued long after Juliet left the stage. She walked backstage in a daze. Her legs still trembled. She wasn't thinking about trophies. She wasn't thinking about prizes. She was simply relieved that it was over. Minutes later, all the contestants were called back onto the stage for the announcement of the results. The atmosphere was tense. Students whispered among themselves, trying to predict the winner. One judge stepped forward. I have been judging public speaking competitions for over 15 years, he paused. I've heard many powerful speeches, but today I heard something even more powerful. I heard honesty. The audience applauded. The judge continued. Every contestant here spoke well, but only 3 will receive awards. The third place winner was announced. The auditorium erupted with applause. Juliet clapped her hands together. She wasn't expecting to hear her name anymore. And now, our second place winner, the judge unfolded the card, Juliet Adebayo. For a moment, she didn't react. Rose jumped to her feet. Juliet, the audience cheered. This time, there was no laughter, only applaud. Juliet slowly walked to the front of the stage. As she received a medal and certificate, the chief judge leaned closer and whispered, "Never hide that voice again." Juliet nodded, holding back tears. Then came the announcement everyone had been waiting for, the first place winner. Another contestant stepped forward to receive the championship trophy. Juliet applauded sincerely. Months earlier, finishing second would have felt like failure. Today, it felt like freedom. As the ceremony ended, dozens of students surrounded her. Some congratulated her, others apologized. Another familiar voice called her name. It was Daniel. He walked over with a warm smile. "I've been looking for a chance to talk to you." Juliet laughed softly. "I know. I owe you an apology." Daniel shook his head. "No, you don't owe me anything." He looked at the medal around her neck. "I just wanted to tell you something." Juliet waited. The strongest person in this auditorium today wasn't the one who came first. It was you. For the first time in a very long while, Juliet believed someone wasn't looking at her parents, they were looking at her. Life on campus slowly changed, not overnight, not because everybody suddenly became kind, but because Juliet had changed. She stopped hiding beneath oversized clothes. She stopped apologizing for the body she was born with. She stopped comparing herself to every beautiful girl she passed. Instead, she began focusing on the things that had always made her extraordinary: her intelligence, her compassion, her courage, her voice. A few weeks later, the Students' Union invited Juliet to speak during the orientation program for newly admitted students. This time, she didn't hesitate. As she walked towards the stage, she passed the same auditorium entrance where months earlier people had laughed and mistaken her for a boy. She paused for a moment, then smiled, not because the memory no longer hurt, but because it no longer controlled her. Inside the auditorium sat hundreds of new students. Some were confident, others were frightened, some smiled, others silently carried insecurities no one else could. Juliet stepped up to the microphone. She looked across the room. "I know what it's like to believe you are not enough." The hall became quiet. "I know what it's like to compare yourself to everyone around you. I know what it's like to wish you could wake up looking like someone else," she smiled. "But I've learned something. The mirror only reflects your appearance. It can never reflect your value." I hope you enjoyed this story and learned from Juliet. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, and turn on the notification bell for more interesting story. Thank you.